Hello everyone and welcome back to another session of Elden Ring PvP and another weapon showcase. Today we're taking a look at a weapon that has much division among the community, not because of people wondering if the weapon is good or bad, but because of its pronunciation. We are taking a look at the spiked Caestus, Caestus. Call it what you will. This weapon has been in many iterations of the FromSoft games and there is no consensus. Getting started with the basics though. The weapon is sold by the isolated merchant in the Dragon Barrow. I'll have an image on screen showing his location. It requires 8 strength and 10 dexterity to wield, and it weighs 2 units. This is a paired weapon, so when you do two-hand it, you actually pull out a second one at no additional weight cost, and that gives you your fun 1-2 punch moveset. With the weapon, it does have Endure for its skill by default, and there are a number of different upgrade paths that you can take with it that are quite good. I chose to go with the heavy upgrade path on it. At plus 25 on heavy, it has a physical base damage of 204 and an A scaling in strength. That said, another upgrade path you can take is the occult one. It actually is quite good on that path as well, giving you a D scaling in strength, a D scaling in dexterity, and a B scaling in arcane. It has a physical base of 195 on occult, and the important part about that is actually the bleed base damage per hit being 38 bleed per hit as opposed to the usual 45. With that said, because you have arcane scaling, your bleed actually will be much higher than 38 per hit. Somewhere typically I've seen in the 80s is relatively common. So that actually gives you a decent chance to bleed your opponents. It's not the most powerful bleed weapon by any means, but it still is quite satisfying. Now that said, there is one other upgrade path that I've personally used with this weapon quite a bit, and that is actually the cold upgrade path. On my muscle mage I use it with that path, and it has a physical base of 156, a magic base of 126, an E scaling in strength and dexterity, and a B scaling in intelligence. It also drops your bleed base down to 38, but it also gives you 105 frostbite per hit, which is quite nice. Now, getting started with the cons of the weapon. The last fight is a great example, and that's the reason why I included it. One of the worst things with this weapon is that you have a very hard time staggering your opponent. Because of that, they can just stand still, poise through a hit, and spam parry, and chances are they will eventually get it, which is a shame. It makes it very hard to use this moveset when you can't reliably attack anyone who has any form of poise. So that's something to keep in mind. The only thing you can do if you do see your opponent start to spam parry like that is to start using jump attacks. It is the only way. So keep that in mind when you're using it, and, well, good luck. Aside from that, other cons of the weapon would be that it is terrible at chasing people down, partly due to the moveset, partly due to the very short range, given that it is as long as your fist. Just kind of is what it is. The damage on the weapon isn't spectacular. It's not quite low, but with a lot of the attacks being a multi-hit move, you really need to hit with both of your attacks, both of your, punches, in order to deal proper damage. Aside from that, though, the bleed isn't too spectacular. On heavy, you'll rarely bleed someone. With occult, it's more likely, but even still not overly common. So keep that in mind. I know I say that as I bleed someone in a fight, but it's been a relatively long fight to this point, and he's dodged a number of my attacks. Thankfully, bleed continued to build up during those dodges, so it kind of just is what it is. Now, as far as the pros, there are much fewer, but that's okay. First off, a big pro of the weapon is that you do have a lot of attacks that are multi-hit attacks, and with that you'll build up your bleed and your status effects more quickly. That's a nice thing to have. And the damage on the weapon is fine if you do manage to land both of the punches in a multi-hit attack. In fact, the damage is actually quite decent. Other things that are good about the weapon would be that it does a great job with Barbaric Roar and with Warcry. Both of those ashes on this weapon are spectacular. You did see me mess around with Lifesteal Fist a little earlier on. I do think it has the potential to be good if Lifesteal Fist had more hyper armor. But really, Warcry and Barbaric Roar are phenomenal on this thing. Having that extra bit of hyper armor so you can go in and trade hits is great because that's something else that this weapon is sorely lacking. It doesn't really have much hyper armor on any of its attacks, and it doesn't do much poise damage on any of its attacks. So having something to augment that for you, like Barbaric Roar and Warcry, is great. Another thing that's great is the tier that causes you to deal more poise damage. That's really, really helpful to have with this weapon, and will help to mitigate the fact that people can just poise through attacks normally, because it does give you a 30% boost to your poise damage that you're dealing. That's pretty substantial, to be honest, so keep that in mind if you do plan on using this thing. That all said, there's really not too much else to go over with the weapon. It is satisfying to use, though. There's just something extremely fun about beating an opponent to death with your fists. It's really nice. There's something just extremely fun about being able to fight against these people who are using katanas, scythes, greatswords, and just punch them in the face. Now that said, there is one fight left after this one, and I will say it's probably the most satisfying fight that I had with this weapon. Stick around to the end, and I hope you enjoy the last fight that's about to start. Anyway, thank you all for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed the video, then please do leave a comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what weapons you guys want to see from me. Do you want to see Rivers of Blood? Because I can make that happen if you guys really want to see it. I think we've all seen it enough for the time being, but hey, let me know. Anyway, thank you all again for stopping by. I'll see you all next time.